This is not a feel-good blog post, not even close. While democracy is the best form of government we have tried by a long shot, it is far from perfect. These quotes have been chosen to make you think.
All right, so we're taking a deep dive today into some pretty provocative ideas about democracy.
Provocative is certainly one word for it.
Yeah, this blog post you sent over democracy. Brilliant quotes that make you bleed. It's, well, it's not exactly a ringing endorsement of democracy, is it?
It does sound like Paulo Laureano has some bones to pick with how we govern ourselves.
He jumps right in with this quote from Brian Drake, whoever that is. But the quote is interesting. Despite popular rhetoric, democracy is not synonymous with freedom. Taking something without permission is theft, but not when the majority goes along with it and calls it taxation.
It's a good illustration of the inherent tension between individual liberty and the will of the majority, right? Like, at what point does a democratic decision start to infringe on personal freedom?
Exactly. Like when you think about taxation, the majority gets to decide how a chunk of your income is spent.
Right. And that can be a tough pill to swallow for some people.
And then Laureano throws in this analogy from James Bovard. Democracy is two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner. Liberty is a well-armed sheep protesting the vote.
Okay. A bit on the nose.
A little ominous, don't you think?
A bit dramatic, perhaps.
Yeah.
But it does highlight that concern about the tyranny of the majority.
Right.
Right? What happens when 51% of the population could vote to take away the rights of the other 49%?
Yeah.
That's the danger.
That's a chilling thought. And I mean, obviously, most democracies have systems in place to prevent that sort of thing. Constitutions, checks and balances.
Right.
Still makes you wonder how secure those safeguards really are when public opinion can shift so easily.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important for people to be informed and engaged.
Yeah.
Right? It's not enough to just have these systems in place. We as citizens have a responsibility to participate, to make sure they're working the way they're supposed to.
So maybe put down the metaphorical firearms and pick up a ballot instead.
Precisely. Civic engagement is key.
So are we the sheep in this scenario?
Well, Laureano seems particularly fixated on the role of money in all this.
Okay.
He quotes L.A. Rollins, democracy, government of the sheep, by the shepherds, for the wolves.
More livestock metaphors, I see.
Right.
But who are the wolves in this case?
Well, he seems to be suggesting that the wolves are the ones with the real power. The wealthy.
Yeah.
The lobbyists. The ones pulling the strings behind the scenes.
So basically he's saying, even if we have the right to vote, it doesn't really matter. The real decisions are made by people with money and influence.
That's one interpretation. And it's true. Campaign finance is a whole other can of worms.
Right.
Different countries have different regulations on how money can be used in elections. And it's constant debate about how to strike that balance between preventing corruption and protecting free speech.
For sure. It's a debate we see playing out all the time.
Right.
Should there be limits on campaign contributions? Should we have publicly funded elections? It gets complicated.
It does.
But going back to Laureano, does he offer any solutions to this whole wolves problem?
Not really. He kind of leans into the cynicism,
Yep, right.
which I guess is to be expected from a blog post with that title. Like, he quotes this Doug Casey, who says, democracy is no solution. It's just 51% bossing the other 49% around.
So he's basically saying democracy is just mob rule with a fancy name?
Well, Casey's statement is definitely provocative, but it does raise some important questions about what happens when the will of the majority clashes with individual rights.
Yeah, that's a scary thought. And then there's that whole issue of how informed the voters actually are.
Right.
Laureano uncorks this quote. I couldn't find who said it originally, but it's a good one. The best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter.
Yeah. It's funny because it's kind of true.
Right.
Like, are we really expecting too much from people to be experts on every complex issue?
Especially these days. It's like information overload out there.
Probably the biggest Donald Trump contribution to the history of democracy.
It really is.
Yeah,
And it's hard to know what to trust.
exactly.
Huh.
And then Laureano hits us with a couple of zingers from H.L. Mencken, you know, the writer.
Boy.
He calls democracy a pathetic belief in the collective wisdom of individual ignorance.
Ouch.
I know, right? And it gets worse. He also compares democracy to the art of running the circus from the monkey cage.
He's got away with words, that Mencken.
He does, but it does make you think, are we all just a bunch of monkeys throwing it, you know?
I think Mencken would probably say yes.
Probably. But seriously, though, is there any hope for democracy to actually have like a reasoned, informed public discourse?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It feels like it's getting harder and harder.
Yeah, I hear you. And I think Laureano's final quote really brings it all home. It's from this guy, Jonathan David Morris.
Okay.
He says, "We talk about democracy as if it's a safeguard for individual rights. Instead, it's become our way of intruding on rights, allegedly, in the name of that most collectivist of concepts, the common good."
Oof, that one hits close to home. It's like every debate these days boils down to individual liberty versus the common good.
Exactly. And there's no easy answer.
Right. It's a balance, and finding that balance is hard.
It is. So where does that leave us?
I'm not sure. Feeling a little cynical, I guess.
I get it. But maybe instead of just feeling cynical, we can use this as motivation.
To do what?
To hold our leaders accountable.
So less complaining, more doing. All right, I can get behind that. So if you're listening and you're feeling inspired to maybe dive into this a little deeper, we'll be sure to include a link to Laureano's blog post in the show notes.
Quite the read.
It is. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. And until next time, keep those brains churning.